Welcome to my session on understanding how Lync Server 2013 leverages the complete Microsoft infrastructure ecosystem. My other session was as long-winded in the title as well, so I think I have a bit of a trend of doing that this year. My name's Justin Morris. I'm a senior consultant at Modality Systems based in the US and the UK, and my role there is to architect all of our Lync solutions for our customers and make sure they go through the project lifecycle through to user adoption pieces, training, and support transition as well. And I'm also a Lync MVP, so I do a lot of work out in the community and helping folks out learn more about the product. So a bit about myself. I've got 8 years UC experience in Australia and the UK, 4.5 years in the UK. I was originally from Melbourne, Australia. And in 2012 and 2013, I deployed the largest Lync voice deployment in the UK, which was 16,000 users. So from that deployment, I gained a lot of experience around understanding how Microsoft plugs into loads of different parts of the infrastructure and what the challenges were in adoption and devices and loads of other things. So that was a great little springboarded project for me. I'm also the co-founder of the Microsoft UC user group in London. And we've been running that for about 2 or 3 years now. We get together quarterly and talk about Lync and discuss news and share ideas and go over technical content and things like that. And then we end up at the pub afterwards and a couple of pints. So it's a good little group of guys. I've also got a blog at justin-morris.net where anything that I find out in the field that's valuable, I'll publish up on there with screenshots and commandlets on how to complete things. And I'm also a contributor on the UC Architects podcast. Does anybody here listen to the UC Architects podcast? One? Awesome, cool. I think that's probably 20% of the audience, average it out, so that's good. What we do is probably every 2 weeks we'll jump onto a Lync call and discuss UC news of the last 2 weeks. So if cumulative updates come out, we'll talk about them. And it's Exchange and Lync as well, and we divide the session up into, the first half is Exchange, second half is Lync, or vice versa. And there's about 8 of us that do that from around the world. And we're actually recording our 34th episode live today at 10:30 in the Partner Theatre. So if you want to come and see us talk live, it should be a good little session. And then finally, I'm on Twitter on the handle Justin Morris without the N. So feel free to tweet me and ask me some questions, anything after the session, during the conference. And if you've got any questions today, just leave them through to the end. We've got a Q&A section at the end there. So why does this matter? Why do we need to understand the underlying infrastructure and all the different Microsoft products that Lync leverages? Well, in terms of business value, this is worthwhile because all the existing staff and infrastructure within an IT team of an organization can be utilized. So the training and prerequisite infrastructure costs are reduced. So rather than saying, okay, I'm going to deploy a brand new UC solution and I have to deploy all these other underlying prerequisite products as well. With Lync, a lot of the time that's not required because the team already has Exchange, they have SQL skills, they have Active Directory skills, and we can walk in and have a conversation with this. Wrong session? Okay. No worries, cool, have a good day. So, yeah, a lot of the time we walk into a project and we have a conversation with the IT teams and I say, Lync needs this for Active Directory, this for SQL Server, and they're like, yep, no problems, we understand that, and the conversation is always quite fluid. And then in terms of leveraging existing Microsoft skill sets, PowerShell-based configuration and management is a big one here because PowerShell is the way of the future in terms of managing IT and automating it and that type of thing. So the way Lync leverages PowerShell is better than sort of any other UC product as far as I'm concerned. Like all the native management is right there in the box. And Windows Server IT pros, I think, have a head start when deploying Lync. Because they already know how Microsoft products work, so getting their head around Lync is not a huge kind of learning curve. So the objective of my session today is twofold. First one is that I'd like you to try to understand the cost savings of leveraging the already deployed Microsoft software, and then understand the technical integration points with each product as well. So I'll keep it kind of 50-50 so that we're maintaining a theme of the business value here, but I do also want to touch on the technical points so that it's you do understand sort of what's under the covers, but I won't get too deep and just keep it kind of high level. So what I'm going to cover is I'll first start off with the integration value of Lync and Office and SharePoint, and then go deeper into more of the underlying infrastructure with Exchange Server, Active Directory, and then talk about how Lync uses databases and replication, and then go into some networking and security stuff, talk about management at the end there, and then finish up with some key takeaways. So a couple of points there for you to go on with your day with. Okay, so the first one, Office and SharePoint. So I think Office is probably one of the best user-facing value points, because the presence integration in Outlook and Word and Excel, and the ability to use edited documents and then escalate into a Lync call or an IM is something that just works out of the box. You know, like the Lync client supports that when you install it, and so this is something that when we talk to businesses, we say, you know, the deep integration into Office is one of Lync's core value points. And in my opinion, I think the Outlook integration is the most valuable, because if you're like me, I sit in Outlook every day, and being able to just, you know, escalate to an IM or a call from somebody, if they've sent me an email and I've thought, okay, you know, I need a bit of clarification on that, I can just shoot them an IM and then escalate up, and it's really a super valuable part of the integration there. And then in terms of a little bit on the technical side of things, for Office 2013 integration, Lync is part of the Office 2013 Professional Plus pack. So when you install Office 2013 Pro Plus, Lync 2013 installs as well. And you can do some stuff around the package to remove that, but by default that's installed with the entire package. So Lync and Office and Word and Outlook all share DLLs. And if you're going to patch your Lync client, you need to make sure that the patch versions match between Office and Lync. Otherwise, you get some unexpected behavior in the Lync client, like you might see some UI things not 100% there. And this is all documented on the Microsoft support articles when you update and cumulative update. So it's all there. It's pretty easy to follow, but it's just one thing for software packaging guys to understand. And then in terms of the set of packages that follow along with that, the first one there at the end, MSO, MSORS, and IDCRL are all Office packages that have to be up to date. And then there's the Lync lock update, which is the actual Lync portion of the update. It's good to know. Okay, so I'm going to talk about SharePoint now, which I think Lync and SharePoint, the value there is not emphasized as much as it should be, because Lync and SharePoint are two like very strong products, and you know, SharePoint on the collaboration side and Portal, and Lync on the communication side. I think telling that message would be a really great thing to do and sort of get across to customers in the market a bit more. So in terms of SharePoint integration, Lync provides presence integration in SharePoint via the Lync contact card. So you can see there I've hovered over my name, and I can see that I can place a voice call, video call, or an email. And this is everywhere in SharePoint. So whenever you see somebody's name, you can hover over it, and then you get those escalation options. And the good thing about this is it's native, so it's provided within Office when you install Lync, and there's no configuration required. You know, you don't have to go into a client or a server and put in a SharePoint URL or anything like that. It's all native on the client side. And the second SharePoint integration method is skill search, where from the Lync client, what I can do is say I don't know the person's name that I'm looking for. Say if I'm a receptionist or working on a switchboard, somebody calls me up and says, I'm looking for a sales guy in New York. And what I can do is in Lync, search by skill and say sales in New York, and then Lync will go off to SharePoint and then search for everybody that has those skills listed in their profile, and then return me a list of users that are relevant to that. And it's pretty simple to configure with a Lync client policy with a URL. And this is something that, if this was configured more, it would really get across the value points in more detail. The other thing with this is it's only supported in on-premise. So if there's Lync Online or SharePoint Online, this feature is unavailable. Cool, so still on the Office side of things, I want to talk about Office web apps. So This was introduced new in Lync Server 2013, and it provides PowerPoint viewing capability in Lync 2013. And the reason this was introduced by Microsoft is that you can see more of the richer experience of PowerPoint slides within Lync 2013, because in the 2010 client, that was actually leveraging a built-in PowerPoint viewer, which was clunky and old and a little bit deprecated. So it was time to really move this functionality up into the current day. And the good thing about Office Web Apps is that you can use this server when it's deployed on premises for Exchange 2013 and SharePoint 2013. So it shouldn't really be seen as a server that is an added pain. It's something that could be leveraged by other products and provide more value across the stack. And the functionality that you see in PowerPoint sharing within Lync 2013 is the same technology that's being used in SkyDrive and Office 365 for PowerPoint web app. So it's good to see some crossover there between the innovation that Microsoft's doing in the cloud coming onto on-premise as well. Next thing I want to talk about is Exchange Server. And Lync and Exchange have a lot of integration points. There's significant value in the way Lync leverages Exchange natively. Because Exchange is the world's #1 enterprise email server or service. 99% of people have Exchange. If they don't, they've probably got notes, and then you're not talking to them about Lync anyway. So the native integration between Lync and Exchange really can't be emphasized enough. There's a lot of technical parts underneath that, but things like Exchange providing voicemail for Lync, providing free busy information for calendar integration, are all these things that makes the two products sort of quite valuable together. And Lync was born out of Exchange back in the day as well, so they have a shared history. So the first thing Lync uses is Exchange Web Services, and this is all over HTTPS, so the Lync client will make a call out to the Exchange server to retrieve information like free busy, so that Lync knows when you go into a meeting, so you can set your presence to busy and in a meeting, so that people know not to contact you or to definitely not try and video call you. And then also things like conversation history. So when I'm typing away on my Lync client and I'm making calls, receiving calls, IMs, that type of thing, all that history is being logged for me into my Outlook mailbox into a dedicated folder called conversation history. And that's deposited using Exchange Web Services. And then the last one there is voicemail retrieval and playback. So when somebody leaves me a voicemail, I get a notification in the Lync client that says you've received a voicemail, and then that pops up in the phone tab as well, where I get a visual representation of how many voicemails I've got. I can play them back, fast forward, rewind, that kind of thing. And that's all done over an Exchange Web Services connection to the server from my Lync client. And this is achieved using Exchange Auto Discover and Outlook Anywhere functionality. So these two things need to be enabled on the Exchange side to facilitate this client functionality. Next one, Exchange-wise, is unified messaging. And is the only supported voicemail platform for Lync Server 2013. The question around this comes up a lot in design meetings and pre-sales meetings, and people say, why can't I use my Avaya modular messaging in the meantime, or my Mitel new point, something like that in the interim. You could, if you wanted to, you could do some kind of clunky call forwarding stuff to get the voicemail to end up in that legacy system, but it's not pretty, because it means you lose out all the good client-side stuff where the voicemail doesn't look like a voicemail in the Outlook mailbox. So whenever you have a conversation with a customer or the business around Lync Voice, unified messaging should be spoken about in that same conversation. And in terms of integration, it is a native integration in the back end. So we just configure the Lync server to talk to the servers and vice versa. And then that lights up in 15 minutes flat. So it's a very quick integration. There's not much overhead to get that working. In terms of deposit, it's a SIP connection from the Lync 2013 pool to the servers. And then in terms of retrieval, it can be accessed within the Lync 2013 client, like I talked about in the previous slide, but also from within Outlook, Outlook Web App, and Outlook Voice Access, where I can dial into my mailbox and listen to my voicemail that way. And the great thing in terms of administration is this is all done by PowerShell as well, so I can automate it, I can streamline the provisioning process, make it really easy for people to get people set up for and enabled for voicemail. And the next integration point on the Exchange side is instant messaging integration in Outlook Web App. And this integrates the Lync contact list and IM functionality directly into Outlook Web App. So if I'm in a scenario where I don't have my PC in front of me, I don't have access to the full Lync client, and maybe at an airport and there's an internet terminal there, I can log into Outlook Web App and I can get access to my contact list and quickly fire off an IM to, say someone send out a revised version of that quote to a customer or something like that. And this provides communicator web access like features. And communicator web access was a server role in the Office Communications Server days that allowed you a web type portal to log into Lync. So that was deprecated in Lync 2010, and this functionality has taken that over. Now, if we talk about the Exchange 2013 integration side of things, so specifically around that version of Exchange, there's some additional value points here that are only available in that version of the product, which is things like archiving your IMs directly into the Exchange Server 2013 mailbox. And this is really good because by default, Lync will natively archive content to a SQL database, but it's not particularly easy to get to. There's not native reporting or discovery functionality. So by archiving your IMs into your Exchange 2013 mailbox, that allows e-discovery and compliance people to go and discover those IMs quite easily. So it's a easier sort of avenue into that archive. And the next one is the unified contact store, where rather than storing my contacts within Lync, I can migrate those across and store those contacts in the Exchange 2013 mailbox. And then this allows me to link all my contacts within the Exchange side of things. So I can link the contact details. So imagine I've got one person. I can have contact details in Exchange, contact details in Lync, and then link all that information together so it's displayed in one contact card, effectively. So if anybody's got Windows Phone, where you can link your contacts together within the People Hub, it's similar functionality to that in the Exchange side. And last one there is HD photo storage. So rather than displaying your photo in Lync within Active Directory, we can move the photo up into Exchange and store a much larger version of the photo. So when you're using Lync 2013, people's photos and videos are emphasized, and when you make a call, Lync will display a really high-res version of that photo. So having a good quality version of the photo is important so you don't get a pixelated, bad impression. And in terms of deployment options of integrating Exchange and Lync, you can do this on-premise, which is a pretty straightforward integration, or you can integrate Lync with Exchange Online via a Lync Edge server as well. So there's tons of flexibility here, depending on what the customer scenario is. That patch version is only on the Office side of things, on the client side. But between Exchange 2010 and Lync 2013, there's no loss of functionality whatsoever. It's really just you get more functionality if you integrate Exchange 2013 and Lync 2013. It's really common across our customers to still see Exchange 2010 and Lync 2013. You're welcome. Great, so the next one I want to talk about now is Active Directory. And Lync and Active Directory really go hand in hand because, to be honest, who doesn't have AD? Every IT guy that I speak to knows a little bit about AD. It's a core IT pro skill. It's where I first started out. When I was doing my kind of apprenticeship straight out of school, I was learning about Active Directory and playing around in group policy. And I think I ended up locking down the domain and almost locked myself out of the administrator account. So this is stuff that IT pros have a good heritage in. So when we talk about the way Lync leverages Active Directory, which I'll talk about in a couple other slides, IT pros really kind of get that straight off the bat. So there's not a big learning curve in understanding the identity side of things. Because AD is really the authentication engine for Lync. So when I log into Lync 2013 client, I'm using my Active Directory credentials. I'm authenticating to Active Directory when I log in, so that tells me, yes, you're allowed to log into Lync and this type of thing. And the great thing here is it's completely native, right? I don't have to go into Lync and configure an LDAP connector to talk to a domain controller or anything like this. When I install Lync, it's installing based on the prerequisite that I already have Active Directory, and Lync goes off and finds my domain controllers for me natively. So in terms of preparing Active Directory for Lync 2013, we need to go through 3 steps here. The first one being a schema preparation, which creates schema classes and attributes to be used by Lync. And this is one that typically requires a lot of change management and reassuring the IT team that the schema extension for Lync is bulletproof and there's not going to be any problems. So I wrote a blog post a couple of years ago about safeguarding this process and being able to roll back, because usually you can't roll back a schema extension. It's a one-way type thing. So this is common across most Microsoft products. Whenever you do Exchange, you do a schema prep for Exchange and other ones as well, System Center. And then the last 2 steps are a forest prep, where Lync goes off and creates global settings and universal groups, and domain preps, where access control entries are created on the domain root. So I've talked about the authentication and identity parts of Active Directory that Lync leverages. The next one is Active Directory certificate services. And this is how we encrypt things in Lync with TLS and MTLS encryption. And TLS is transport layer security, and MTLS is mutual transport layer security. We'd use AD certificate services to assign internal certificates for all the Lync servers so that everything is encrypted by default. And usually a ADCS deployment is already deployed within an organization, and Lync can leverage that straight off the bat, or it can be deployed as part of the Lync project and leveraged in that way. And the great thing here is that all your Active Directory joined client machines automatically trust the enterprise certification authority. So when you assign certificates to Lync to encrypt all the traffic, when the user needs to sign in, they automatically trust that server, and there's no barriers there. Okay, next section, I want to talk about databases and replication. So the databases that Lync has, what products does it leverage, and then the new replication technology in Lync 2013, how is that achieved? So the first one here is SQL Server. And Lync and SQL Server have been in bed with each other since day dot. It's a core part of Lync, and it really is the backbone of Lync Server, because it provides the back-end and front-end databases to store all the static and dynamic data that you have in Lync. So things like users' contact lists, information about their conferences, response group information, core park information, configuration, all these type of things are all stored within a SQL database. So they really are the heart and soul of the environment. The first one here is the back-end databases that sit on the back-end server. And they're really the authoritative source of all the data, so that if I lose servers, they can start up, look into that database and retrieve the user information. And they store things like the central management store, response group server information, core park service, location information service, and then finally user and conference data. They also store persistent chat info, archiving, and monitoring. And in terms of the versions that are supported, Lync 2013 supports SQL Server 2008 R2 and 2012. And then providing high availability options for this backend component, you can leverage SQL Server database mirroring or failover clustering. So there's a lot of flexibility there to provide a consistent solution. And the backend database part is really, it's important in terms of getting things set up initially, but then it becomes more of a maintenance type thing as the Lync front-end servers start to kick into play. Because in 2013, there's less of a dependency on the back-end databases. So once the front-end servers are started up, they run sort of autonomously, and the back-end databases aren't used as much. Because the sync agent on the front-end servers backs up the data from the RTC local database on the front ends and puts that into the RTC XDS database in the back end. And that happens every 30 seconds in what we call a lazy write. And so that's done purely as a kind of disaster recovery feature, where that if the front end server fails, it can start up cold and then look into the back end and retrieve the user data and continue functioning. And if the back end server fails, users will keep working and they'll be uninterrupted for up to 30 minutes before they go into limited functionality mode and they'll lose their contact list. This is actually a configurable parameter, but we don't recommend you play around with it too much. We just keep the defaults out of the box. Okay, the next one is front-end databases. So we talked about what sits in the back end. There's also SQL Express databases now on the front-end servers. And the two instances that are there are Lync local, which stores storage service data, and the second is a really important one, which is RTC local, and that holds the replicated copies of user data and the CMS. And so these are the data stores that the Lync clients are looking at in a sort of business as usual type scenario. And the way this works is user data is hydrated into the front end from the back end server on service start. So in the last slide I had about the back end there, when the front end starts, it hydrates that user data into the front end RTC local instance. So that's the back end and the front end side of things around SQL. It's good to understand the technical integration points there. And really, when Microsoft set out and said, look, we need a database for this kind of thing, it was a no-brainer to use SQL for this. There's been some conversations over the years of, should Lync use the Exchange database for this? Same with Exchange. Should Exchange use SQL? Because SQL is the sort of master database product. It depends on the product requirements, and I can still see Lync and SQL being in bed with each other for a couple of years to come. And the good thing here is that when we walk into a customer and we're talking about leverage points into other technologies, it's usually easy to talk to the SQL DBA teams about requirements for Lync because they understand everything around that, and it's their day job to manage databases. So we can walk in and say we need these instances, this version of SQL, we need mirroring or clustering, and the guys in those teams know what we're talking about straight away. And the last SQL Server component that Lync leverages is reporting services. And this is used for the out-of-the-box monitoring reports, where Lync can provide you call quality data, detailed records around users' calls, and it's a great way to measure adoption and troubleshoot issues that may prop up, especially in a voice deployment. And this is usually co-located on a back-end server, or it might be a dedicated SQL Server reporting services instance. Depending on the environment, there may be a dedicated one there already that you can leverage for that. So we can see here that in terms of SQL Server, Lync leverages that quite a lot. It's probably less than Exchange, but it's a more critical part in terms of the technical integration and also the value proposition. Okay, so in terms of replication, the next product I want to talk about here is Windows Fabric. And this is a new replication technology used by Lync Server 2013. And really what it's doing is evolving that role of the front-end server from being less of a kind of dumb application server sort of thing and passing through that traffic straight back to the back end. It's becoming more of a core role in itself where it's storing all that user data. And so what Windows Fabric does is provides replication across front-end servers. So I'll have a primary, secondary, and tertiary front-end server, and the user data is stored on each of those, and Windows Fabric replicates those around for me. And when users are enabled, they're allocated to a routing group, and replicates that routing group gets replicated across those three front-end servers that I talked about. So in terms of how Lync uses Windows Fabric, where I've got that routing group of three front-end servers, only one front-end server is active at a time. So I've got all my users logging into one front-end server. If that fails, then the secondary lights up straight away, and all my users log straight back into that, and they have no loss of service. But in the scenario of all three of those front-end servers failing, Windows Fabric will go off and find a remaining front-end server for those users to use and rehydrate their user data from the back end. So this is another thing where rather than Microsoft going off and building a completely new replication technology from scratch, they went out and said, look, we've got Windows Fabric, and this will do exactly what we need to replicate user data across front ends and provide us with a more robust, high availability model for Lync functionality. Okay, next section I want to talk about is networking and security. And these are all the underlying network protocols that Lync leverages to provide things like Lync Phone Edition functionality, and even just basic service discovery functionality with things like DNS. So the first one here is DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. And this is another thing that as a Windows IT pro, I know when I started out as a admin, I learned about AD, learned about DNS and DHCP. And those are really core skills that most IT pros have. So when you go in and talk about Lync within an IT team and say, I've got requirements around DHCP and DNS, they go, yep, no worries, let me know what you need, I'll get it set up. And so it's a very low barrier to entry. So Lync for DHCP requires this for Lync Phone Edition provisioning, which is phones like the Polycom CX600, Astra phones, and the HP phones as well. And what this does is there's two vendor classes that Lync leverages, OC Phone and UC Client. And the OC Phone vendor class that is exchanged within a DHCP discovery process is to do VLAN reassignment, because a lot of voice teams, when they have traditional VoIP PBXs deployed, they'll put all the legacy phones onto a dedicated VLAN. So we can do that with Lync Phone Edition as well via this vendor class. And then the second vendor class there is the UC client. And this is the one that actually sends back the information to Lync Phone Edition to find servers in the cert provisioning service, which is option 43 and 120 there. And this can take a bit of configuration sometimes, depending on the DHCP product used out in environments. But and it can be a bit difficult to troubleshoot, but Lync Phone Edition is the only Lync feature that leverages DHCP. And it does ship with a utility called DHCP util. So you can go onto the Lync server, just put in the name of your server, and it will spit you back all the hex code that you need to configure into DHCP to get this up and running. In terms of setup, Windows DHCP server is the easiest to get this working with, because DHCP util, when you use that application and feed it your server information, it can then go off and configure DHCP for you if you're doing that on the DHCP server. But other DHCP solutions are supported, like Infoblox or other vendors, and there's published guides online for that as well. So when this is being configured, you're not going to be left on your own. There's the path has been trodden before. Okay, next one is DNS. And really, DNS is a fundamental requirement for Lync 2013 to function, because this is how our Lync clients and Lync servers discover web services and register RFQDNs. So everything that is built into the Lync client under the covers for the client sign-in process, DNS is how all that's discovered. And we use internal host records in the first instance. And there's two pool FQDNs that are used by Lync, SIP and web, which is linkpool1.contoso.com and linkwebpool1.contoso.com, and then server FQDNs that are automatically populated on domain join. And in terms of the pool FQDNs there, one thing to note is that the SIP FQDN is DNS load balanced, but the web FQDN is hardware load balanced. So I'm not going to cover hardware load balancers in this session today, but there's definitely some vendors you can talk to on the expo floor about hardware load balancing. And the next type of DNS record that Lync uses is external host records. And these are all the underlying infrastructure requirements to get things like remote user access to work, federation, public IM connectivity to Skype, These are the type of records that need to be in public DNS. And so we have SIP, webconf, and AV on the edge server, and then web services URLs to find our reverse proxy, the meet URL, so that when somebody within their Outlook invite clicks on the meeting URL, it hits that meet.domain.com host record and finds the Lync reverse proxy to join the meeting. And then we've got dial-in for our dial-in conferencing numbers, web apps for Office web apps, and linkdiscover.domain.com for Lync mobile client, Windows 8 store app, and Windows Lync 2013 desktop app as well. So some challenges that we see is that a customer may have limited access over their external DNS records, and so they need to submit these up to a third party to manage, or it's not something they do quite often. So 9 times out of 10, this is pretty easy to get set up, but there can be some bumps along the way. So the last one there with Lync Discover, what I'm going to talk about next is the Auto Discover service that leverages that. And so all the Lync 2013 clients in the 2013 version of Lync will attempt to connect to linkdiscoverinterno.contoso.com, and then if they can't find that, they'll connect to linkdiscover.contoso.com. And these new clients will use the Auto Discover service to locate their server rather than the DNS service record, which has traditionally been used, which is now de-emphasized. And the reason this is used now is so that all the clients across the Lync stack, from the mobile clients to Windows 8 client to the traditional desktop client, are all using the same discovery process to find servers to log in. So I've got there at the end that the SRV record is de-emphasized. So I'm going to touch on that a bit here as well, because it is still relevant in a Lync deployment, and it's good that you sort of understand where this fits into. And service records can be tough in a internet-facing zone sometimes. Some folks don't have access to set up service records within their external zone, so one to look out for there. So the internal one is for logging in when you connect to the internal network, and the external one is for remote user access and for federation. And the federation one is the most important, because if I've got my company and partner's company and I want to federate between the two, our edge servers are going to discover each other using that last record there. So this is really important for lighting up that type of functionality. Okay, moving on from DNS, I want to talk about reverse proxy products. And Lync uses a reverse proxy to download web service-related content when connected remotely. So things like joining the meeting, downloading address book, expanding distribution lists within Lync 2013 client are all accessed through a reverse proxy. Microsoft has 3 different reverse proxy products that can be used in a Lync 2013 deployment. So I'm going to go through each of those in this section here. And the first one is my favorite, the Forefront Threat Management Gateway, which has been discontinued, but there is a huge install base out there, and loads of guys that are working in security and networking know how TMG works. They know how to set up web publishing rules. It's easy to set up out of the box as well if you need to do this from scratch. And it provides industry standard traffic inspection. So in terms of passing this through a penetration testing process or getting security teams to sign it off, TMG is pretty rock solid in that sense. So whenever I have a conversation with a customer and I say, Lync requires a reverse proxy, do you have Forefront TMG installed? And they say yes, I sort of usually breathe a bit of a sigh of relief, because we can use that and it's easy to set up. The next option you've got here is IAS Application Request Routing, or IAS ARR, which some people call a pirate reverse proxy. And it's really a bit of a no-frills type reverse proxy, where it's just leveraging Internet Information Services that comes in Windows Server to pass through those web requests back to the internal network. And I think this is really only a solution to look at for small and medium type deployments, because it's not really enterprise grade, sort of rock solid. But it does get the job done, and it's a good sort of solution if you're just looking for something quite tactical. The third one here is Windows Server 2012 R2 web application proxy. And based on what we're seeing out in the industry, this is potentially really the future of web publishing and reverse proxying, because it can be used for a lot of the new bring your own device type features that is coming in the latest version of the server product in Windows 8.1. So things like Workplace Join, where I've got a Android tablet or a Windows 8.1 PC, I can just join temporarily to a workplace, and that's all published through web application proxy. And the third one here to keep in mind is it does require ADFS, Active Directory Federation Services, which you may or may not have deployed in the environment, depending on whether you're doing some cloud hybrid stuff with Office 365 as well. So one to look out for in terms of requirements. So we can see that in terms of getting this requirement set up for for reverse proxying, there's a lot of cost savings to be had because we can leverage existing Microsoft products for this requirement. Okay, next one I want to talk about here is management. And ongoing management of Lync is definitely something to take into account in the scoping side of things, and there's not a lot of overhead required here. I talked about PowerShell before. I'm going to talk a bit more in this section around group policy as well. So there's a lot of options there, and these are all skills that IT pros have always had. And so when we go out and talk to customers and say, we deployed Lync, and here's how we're going to manage it, uses PowerShell, IT teams say, yep, no worries, we've got that sorted. So the first one here is group policy. This is previously really heavily utilized by Office Communicator. It's less so used within Lync 2010 and Lync 2013 because all the functionality that was rolled out as part of a group policy is now replaced by native in-band provisioning. And this means that to get configuration down to a Lync client, it doesn't need to be domain joined. It can be any type of endpoint. So my mobile phone, when I'm connecting it to Lync, all the configuration and policy I want to put onto that device is put in via the sign-in process. So I don't need to enforce any type of MDM solution to get Lync configuration onto that device. But a really important part of group policy is quality of service configuration. And you'll hear this resonated throughout the conference around ensuring voice quality, media quality, quality of service is really important to ensure that all that media traffic is prioritized as it traverses the network. So on the client side of things, Lync will use a group policy object to mark that media traffic with the right DSCP tags. And this is not only on the client side, but also on the server side. So that when my media traffic leaves a conferencing server, it's got the highest priority when it hits the network, and it gets all the way through to the client. We don't lose any packets, so there's no jitter or delay, things like that. And the next way that Lync uses group policy is via bespoke registry settings. And these are things like if you wanted to turn off spell check or turn on or off whether Lync logs in automatically when it starts. So there's some flexibility here, but most of the things that you'll configure in Lync in terms of policies will be done natively via in-band provisioning. But definitely I think the one takeaway from group policy is around quality of service. And there's loads of configuration guides online that other MVPs have published on how to get this set up. And it's a really important part of voice deployment or conferencing deployment for Lync. Cool. The next one in terms of management I want to talk about is, oh, sorry.
What other things can you do with the Lync GPOs? There must be lots of things. For example, can you block IM, allow presence, voice, video, etc.?
You used to be able to do that. I can't quite remember if you can still. It used to be in the Office Communicator in Lync 2010 days. But there is things that some other MVPs have discovered where if you can find out the registry key to turn off certain things in the UI, you can then put that into a GPO and enforce it onto the client. And that would be any type of GPO, because then that's just a registry hack, basically. Yeah. Yeah, the Lync GPO, I don't see that used too much anymore. In some older deployments, people would use the Lync GPO to hard code server names. So if they wanted to ensure that Lync clients go to particular FQDNs, they could do that with Lync GPO. But yeah, most of the things are inbound provisioning these days, 99%. Great. So PowerShell and RBAC. PowerShell really is like the underlying kind of golden child, I think, here, because it transcends across all different Microsoft products. So if I've got Lync and Exchange and SharePoint and SQL and System Center, all these type of things, we can build some PowerShell-based workflows across those for things like provisioning and management of users and endpoints. So the way Lync leverages PowerShell is it has a whole bunch of different commandlets here that are prefixed with get-cs, set, new, remove, grant, and this is things like I can get a user, I can get a policy, I can set a configuration, remove a configuration, grant a policy, all throughout PowerShell here. And these are common verbs across all the Microsoft Server products. So you'll see get, set, new, remove, all these type of commandlets in Exchange as well. And this facilitates automation across these Microsoft products, like I was talking about. And a common automation scenario that we see is with Lync and Exchange and AD, where a user might get put into a particular OU and then enabled for Lync, and then their phone number set in Lync and policies assigned to them in Lync. And then there'll be another part of that PowerShell script that will enable them for Exchange unified messaging, set a greeting, and then send an email out to them. And that can all be put into one single script that's automated as part of an onboard provisioning process. So there's loads of automation value around this that can be realized. And in terms of the pedigree of PowerShell, it's a rapidly growing community. There's loads of scripting skills out there within IT pros. The amount of times I walk into customers and there's usually a PowerShell guru, a guy that really has got his head around it, that's happening more and more now. And we're also seeing a lot of community-developed complementary tools and applications. So one example is MVP Pat Richard, who's written some scripts around getting Lync connection information, setting Lync server prerequisite software as well. These are all things that have been coming out of the community that allow IT pros in businesses to get more visibility of the environment and have a lower sort of overhead in terms of management. The second one here in terms of management is role-based access control. And this provides organizations with granular administration over the Lync environment. So we can say that rather than somebody just having blanket access over the environment, we can say that, hey, I've got a team of guys who I only want to be able to modify user information, or I've got some guys in the UC team who are just voice people, so I want them to only have access over the voice components of Lync. And we can get quite granular with this. We can lock it down to particular sites and regions. So if there's administrative boundaries within your organization and you want to separate that says, hey, I've got administrators in North America, so I only want them to administer the Lync equipment in North America. Same in Europe. We can do that with scoping some of the RBAC settings with Lync. Cool. Okay, so that kind of brings me to the end here. It's a big sort of like whip around of all the Microsoft products that Lync leverages and the cost-saving benefits there. So the key takeaways I want to get across to you here is that Lync Server 2013 leverages more Microsoft products than any other. So there's tons of complementary value across each of those. When you're talking to customers, you can go in and say, here's a list of Microsoft products that Lync leverages and the user experience value you get off of that. But you can say that this isn't going to be a challenge for us because a lot of this is natively integrated and we can light it up quite quickly. And the second there is that the total cost of ownership and deployment time is reduced by utilizing these existing services and skilled staff. So like I mentioned about things like PowerShell skills, Active Directory skills, SQL Server skills, Exchange skills, all these types of people out in the organization already can be tapped up to say, look, we need your help with the Lync deployment. and we can make that rollout a bit more rapid. And then the last one there is user and administrator experience is enhanced with this native integration, particularly on the user side with the Office integration, SharePoint integration, all that's native and lights up by itself. And then the administrator experience is enhanced by things like PowerShell, RBAC, group policy. These are all native skills that these guys have already, so they're quite transferable. Okay, with that, does anybody have any questions? You guys come just to the end. No? Okay. Yeah? Okay, cool.
Justin, you mentioned earlier about the Exchange server or Exchange Online.
Yep.
With comparison drawback going one to the other.
I would say that really we see more often now Lync on-premise and Exchange Online because you don't really lose any functionality there anymore because everything's through the Edge server, so you can deposit your Lync voicemail into Exchange Online. You can do the Exchange Web Services calls. So as far as I'm concerned, if all the mailboxes are sitting in Exchange Online, it's fine with me. You just need to scope that as part of the project and make sure that everybody's aware of the requirements. No worries. Anyone else in the back there?
Yeah, what if, for whatever reason, security-based, we don't want to publish Exchange Web Services for use with OWA and Exchange, but we need to publish it for use with the Edge server? Is there a way to limit that security risk?
That's a really good question, yeah. So with that was really a challenge up until recently. And I've had that exact conversation with security teams where they've said, we lock down access to Exchange externally so that nobody can get in because we use solutions like Good or a mail sort of sandbox on the mobile device for that. And there are things you can use with TMG to only publish Exchange URLs to particular client IDs. So when a Lync mobile client comes in and hits TMG, it displays and says it's a Lync mobile client, so it can get access to Exchange. But an iPhone can't get access to Exchange. So there are ways to do that, both the TMG and F5 load balancers. But there are F5 load balancers can do that with some policies as well. And
There's also Lync Solutions has applications that limit you can connect to Exchange Web Services inside limited Lync people.
yeah, so I was going to say there's a couple of third-party solutions coming out now specifically around security that sit on the Lync Edge server and the TMG server that will only allow Lync clients access to those internal services, so you can lock it down for everything else. So there are answers. Cool. Anybody else? Questions? Yep.
It's my mistake, but I thought this was going to be a session on other Microsoft products like Exchange, CRM, Lync Word, and Excel, and all of those Office products, how Lync interacts with them, not interacts with infrastructure like DNS, which isn't really a Microsoft product. Microsoft utilise it, but it does generally give out solutions outside of Microsoft as well.
Yeah, so the way that I scoped the session was looking at all the underlying Microsoft infrastructure. I mean, DNS is a Microsoft server feature, along with DHCP as well. So that's sort of how I scoped that. And I tried to keep a balance between the business value things and technical things. And if you've got some questions, I'm happy to sort of dive into more stuff after.
With regard to other applications that Microsoft manages, how does Lync interact with those?
What products specifically? Sort of.
I'd love to know how CRM integrates get pop-ups from a Lync inbound tool, CRM. Does Microsoft allow that functionality? How to look from out of the box?
Yeah, so I actually talked about it in my session yesterday about those types of solutions, and there are some products on the market because by default there is no Lync integration with Dynamics CRM, but there's products that you can get that will display user information in the toast. So say I get a call comes through from, I work in a education organisation and a parent of a child calls up. Rather than just displaying the phone number, I want to display that person's name and maybe a title that I have in CRM for them as well. So there's products that can do that interact with the client side. And there's others that will also populate the call data from Lync into CRM for you as well, so it gets registered as an interaction on that CRM entry. Cool. Is there any others I can cover for you there? No? Cool. No worries. Excellent. Any other questions? Nope. Okay, so I will say thank you, and thanks. Also do the evals on my link. That would be really helpful. But if you've got any other questions, you can tweet me at Justin Morris. But with that, thanks a lot for coming, and enjoy the rest of your day.